What if Transcendence heroes never became a thing? What's up, guys? Barry Gaming here, back with some more Idle Heroes, and today we're going to start a bit of a new series inspired by Marvel. I just got done watching the What If series, and it made me think a lot of stuff about Idle Heroes. What if this didn't happen? What if this didn't happen? And the first and biggest one that came to my mind is, what if Transcendence heroes never became a thing? What would the game look like without these Transcendence heroes? Would we need a lot of these end game mode advancements? Would we actually need Tower of Dream? Would we need stuff like that? I would say yes. But what would it look like without those Transcendence heroes? Because let's be honest, a lot of these heroes that have come out have pretty much paled in comparison, mainly just because the Transcendence heroes are so strong. So what heroes could actually be good but aren't because of that, both in PvP, in PvE modes? It's going to be interesting to think about here. So I've kind of done a little bit of brainstorming, and I kind of want to go over some of the heroes here. Well, number one, Ankh-Kirmaru, would he actually be useful? I would have to say probably still no. He is kind of got a weak kit. His revive isn't good, but you know who would probably be the best hero, hands down, in the game right now? I would have to say Eloise. Now, is she not strong now? Absolutely not. She's very, very strong, even in the current meta with Transcendence heroes. But if you were to take out all those Transcendent heroes, and we still had Void 4 heroes in the game with all these upgraded artifacts and even Celestial Island residences, I think Eloise would be hands down one of the strongest heroes in the game. She already does Sealand 25. She's like the answer for the Shadow faction. She does very well in Tower of Dream. She does very well in Void Vortex. She does well pretty much everywhere except for straight up PvE boss damage. I do think Eloise would probably be hands down the number one hero in the game. Tix would still be useful. I don't know if Tix would be less useful like he is now, because if those new game modes came out and we didn't have the Transcendence hero that would be the answer to those, like the Queens, the Jaras, would they have changed the mode to make Tix not as useful? And I think the answer would have been no. I think the improvements, the Sealand 21 and 25, the Tower of Dream, the Void Vortex Vanquisher, I think all of those things right there would have still been Tix viable, and they wouldn't have lowered the attack values of the enemies if Transcendence heroes didn't exist. Are you following what I'm saying here? I think the reason why Tix got the quote-unquote nerf in the brand new game modes, it's kind of forced people into buying and building those Transcendence heroes. Without that, I don't think there would have been any reason to change the way the attack on the enemies would have been. And that would have been pretty interesting, because that probably would have made even more heroes viable, or just more Tixes viable. You might have been running like 3 Tix in every lineup. I don't know. Ithqua, she still is the top dog in PvE damage. I don't think anything would have changed there. Now, what I do think is interesting is the Fortress faction. I think, honestly, Inosuke would probably have more value, especially in Sealand, because as you guys have seen in our Sealand 21 and 25 clear with our Sword Flash Shia, we ended up using a damage dealing Inosuke, and he did pretty good damage. Could you do it without Sword Flash? Of course not, but I feel like most of the new modes were tuned with those really overpowered Transcendence heroes in thinking about them. Whereas if they weren't there, I think Inosuke would have been a prime candidate and would have been a very good choice to have on your account for most players. Fiona as well, I think, would have gone up in value, because pretty much Fiona, her main spot was that PvP meta. She definitely got pushed out when Vesa came out, because Vesa just does her job much better. Vesa also heals, also deals damage, just everything better than Fiona. I do think the Fiona and Inosuke shield nerfs would have happened with Magic Stone Sword either way. I do think that would have been, because they don't like cheese methods. But I do think Fiona would still be a PvP meta hero. I think Sherlock would probably still be pushed out of the meta, though. The fact that the changes to Purify still happened. I think that would have happened whether we had Transcendence heroes or not. It's kind of sad, but I feel like the newest hero in almost every faction has been a huge letdown. And I don't think Transcendence heroes not being a thing would have changed anything at all. Because Saya, well, okay, really doesn't fit in the meta. Would her CC be more relevant without all these big damage dealing burst heroes? Potentially, but I don't think so. Kind of the same thing with Onkirimaru. I just don't think he would have been good enough. Waldeck, though, I do feel like could have had some potential to being a meta hero. I know a lot of people were using him for his Blood Frenzy effect in some Andrea teams, things like that. I mean, he would have been decently strong. I feel like he's still one of the best answers for Sealand 20. I think he would have been even better. The other two heroes of note, Ignis and Delacium, I still think they would have had their normal spot either way. Doesn't really change much. Ignis would just be feeding to a Tix or something like that. That's pretty much her job, is to give that energy and control immunity. She'd just pick a different target and she would still be reliable as a hero. Mirax, I just don't think his kit was good enough. And again, the fourth hero that recently came out, Xiaoho, he might have had potential. Because as we said, his active ability is very Sword Flash-esque. Granted, it can't do AoE, which I think is the biggest difference, but he could have been that huge burst hero, and I do think he might have had some place in some game modes meta where you're constantly feeding energy to him. He's using an active, because this active right here deals a ton of damage. It just doesn't feel like that when you compare it to a Sword Flash. So if Sword Flash didn't exist, would Xiaoho kind of be that answer? And I feel like there would have been people that made this hero work, but with the Transcendence heroes being a thing, I don't think he would have worked at all. Not one bit. Gloria, I feel like would have had potential to be very, very good with her magic bubble ability, causing stuns and everything. I think if there wasn't so much burst damage in the meta at the time when she came out because of the Transcendence heroes, she could have had a spot that was pretty decent, at least in PvP, maybe even in game modes like Tower of Dream. But right now, there's just so many better options. You could say the same thing about Flora, but I don't think so. Her Twine is just way too reliable with the percent chance. And then, of course, Rogan. I mean, Rogan would be here, I feel like, no matter what. He's one of those heroes that his Warpath Roar and his Bloodthirsty Predator, his Bloodthirsty effect is just so good. Such an awesome ability. I feel like Olivia might have had a chance to come back in the meta as well with the Shrink abilities. It would have been harder to kill people off. I do think there would have been potential for her. And another one I actually think is maybe even a V4 Gustin. Going back to the Shadow faction, it might have had a chance to do something finally in the last bit of the meta here at V4. Could have been something good. Now the Dark faction. I believe Forsty's would have been stronger had he come out when Sword Flash Shia and Queen weren't already in the meta. He was a great counter tool to everybody running like 2 to 3 Rogans, maybe even 4 Rogans at the time, because of that Curse of Decay, removing those buffs and turning it into damage that the Rogans put on your allies. I think he might have had better uses. He had survivability issues, which I think without Transcendence heroes would have let him stay in the meta longer if there weren't as bursty and big damage heroes out there. I think he would have been better. I also think Drake probably wouldn't be as useful without Transcendence heroes because of the way he synergizes with Sword Flash Shia for things like Void Vortex. I think a lot of people would still use him for PvE, like, you know, boss damage and things. But as far as Vortex and everything, I don't think that synergy would be there unless it was with Xiaoho, which could have been a possibility. So, oddly enough, I feel like there's a hero that went down in value if Transcendence heroes didn't exist, and that would be Drake. Carrie, I think, would still be much stronger than she is right now in the PvP meta. She's pretty much pushed out of almost all teams. Some teams still use one if they're pairing her with an Andrea and Asmodel the Dauntless. I also think Amun-Ra probably wouldn't be as prevalent right now because her Healing Curse and Bubbles are really good against some Transcendence heroes. Also good in Vortex Vanquisher. So again, I feel like she might have had less uses without Transcendence heroes. So this is one that would be interesting. Both Drake and Amun-Ra, I feel like might have been worth less in a meta where Transcendence heroes never came out. Lastly, we come to the light faction. Andrea, I feel like would still be one of the strongest heroes in the game, especially paired with a lot of carries. Even without Asmodel the Dauntless, Andrea's kit is just so awesome. Trashy Lago. I don't think anything could have saved the release of Trashy Lago. I don't think, even without the Transcendence heroes, because when she came out, we were getting our third one. We were getting Asmodel the Dauntless a couple weeks later. Even when she came out, there were only two. There was, of course, Scarlet Queen Halora and Sword Flash Shia. Even in that meta, she just couldn't do enough. She just wasn't tanky enough. She didn't do enough damage reliably. I don't think anything would have changed her. I do think Russell would have been much more relevant, especially seeing more carries in the meta. Russell was a really good counter to carries with his ping damage, just shredding them to pieces. I think Russell would have stayed in the meta much longer if it wasn't for Transcendence heroes. Kind of makes me sad. And I honestly think Ada would have been a huge PvP hero still. Without those Transcendence heroes, she would have one of the best kits in the game. Even to this day, like 2+ years later, I still think she would have been good. But we did get Transcendence heroes. But it's fun to think, especially after watching the Marvel What If series. What if these overpowered heroes never came out? Would we look at heroes differently? So, in the comments down below, I want you guys to leave comments and let me know what you think about my opinions on it. Do you think it would have turned out a little bit different? And let me know what other topics you guys would like to hear from me about if we're talking about what if something didn't happen. Or happened differently. Or happened that doesn't happen, it just doesn't exist just yet. So I figured this would be a fun idea to talk about. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys next time.